most cost-effective manner you can, because policies are not always driven by economics at the outset. Implement your program and always be assessing what are you getting for it. And if you're not getting what you want, make some adjustment and start over. And again, the program adjustments, one example of that would be the feed-in tariffs in Germany. You know, as you get more and more solar, you are creating that market transformation, the costs are coming down, reduce your feed-in tariff. Okay, can't have a policy slide without talking about shale gas. The shale gas revolution is really, in my opinion, is really underground. I know it's had enormous economic impacts, but we're kind of coming back to where we were. We're now building, you know, methanol plants. We're building fertilizer plants in the United States. We used to have those things, and you know, so now they're coming back. So I use the word the shale gas revolution a little bit more circumspectly than some people, because I think in large case, at least on the surface, it's bringing us back to where we were. But underground, clearly, and you know, George Mitchell, who was really the founding father of the fracking technology and the horizontal drilling, recently died. I think this is really his legacy to the world, be it good or be it bad, depending on your opinion. But it's just, you know, up to 2008, really, you know, nobody really saw it coming, I would argue. You know, if you look at the Energy Information Administration's annual energy review, you know, there's maybe a mention of the fact that there's these unconventional resources, you know, up until about 2008, 2009. It's not really till you get to 2010 or so that you actually start talking about it and you start breaking it out. And then you can see why. Because their projections, and these are from the most recent energy review to 2013, you know, we've already seen a significant impact, and at least they're projecting that this is going to continue. And a large part of that is as we have the ability to get the transmission and pipeline access. You know, in the Bakken in North Dakota, which has had, you know, enormous socioeconomic impacts, not to mention energy market impacts, they're flaring most of the natural gas because there aren't any pipelines to bring it out. So that's predominantly oil, but once we get those pipelines built, then we'll see that impact from that gas as well. Where this is taking us, and where the real revolution, I think, may be on the surface, is that we're now saying, Energy Information Administration is now saying, we're probably going to be a net exporter of natural gas. And a lot of this will depend on whether or not they get the permits to export LNG. But that's enormous. You know, I was at the World Petroleum Congress in 2005, and I was talking about how many LNG import terminals I thought would get built in North America. I mean, that's 2005, that's not even 10 years ago. And now we're talking about how many export terminals are we going to have, and we're turning our import terminals into export terminals. So I think the fact that we are not going to be relying on imports of much of anything is probably the real revolution, because I think we will not go into places, you know, like Iran, like Iraq and Afghanistan. We might not be there had we been in this position 10 years ago.
So they're paying us to be a net exporter about 2017?
2017, I think, is the crossover year. And that changes a little bit year to year. I think they've actually brought that forward from 2020 in the last year or two. And again, that's going to depend on getting all of those export permits ratified. And that's, different people have different opinions on whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. So that's the supply side. On the demand side, it's had also an enormous impact. Here's you know, can't talk about a market without prices. Here's the peak in 2008 when we had the big commodity boom. And then the price came down about as fast as it went up. And then we actually, and this is the annual average Henry Hub, we actually saw sub $2 prices on a daily and monthly basis at the Henry Hub during this time period. And what that did for us is that everybody started switching. I don't know if you remember the energy price comparison. Coal prices have kind of been on a secular increase, slowly but surely. So natural gas prices drop through the floor, and everybody says, we're not going to keep on burning that now more expensive coal. We're going to shift more and more to the natural gas generation. What that did in April of last year, for the very first time, we had equal amounts of electricity generated from natural gas as we had from coal across the country. And that, it happened 1 month, and then gas prices started to come up, and you got more back, the switch back to coal. But that was a really remarkable circumstance, because coal has been king for so long in our electricity generation markets. So I think it's continues to be an exciting time in energy, because there is so much going on, and the markets, of course, are all integrated, and you have to have some clue about what's going on everywhere. This goes to that flat load that we have in our rural electric co-op. I've included LPEA here, that's our co-op. So you can see, compare them to the Californians and also to Gainesville. So let's start in Florida. Gainesville, Florida, the weather changes, but not as much as it does elsewhere in the country. So they have the same time of use rate all year round. So, in the early morning hours, it's cheap, and then everybody turns on their air conditioners, and all during the day until late into the night, it's expensive, and then back to the middle of the night, it's cheap. So this is a way to try and, inspire you to turn your air conditioner off, turn your lights off, do your dishwasher in the middle of the night, etc. In California, you would think it might be, more similar, because, well, I guess that's not really true, because California is really 2 states in one. So the 2 states in one is not as similar as you might think. So the yellow here is Pacific Gas and Electric, which is in the Bay Area. And you can see they have basically 3 seasons. They have a winter, a summer, and a shoulder. And during the height of their summer, it's a $2 differential for their time of use rates. And in the winter, you can see it goes down to winter in their off season. It's only about a multiplier of 1. In Southern California, you have somewhat similar, but you can see, because it's a much warmer climate, you can see that their multiplier in the heat of the summer is 3 times. So even within California, among the utilities, you have much different incentives to move your load. And then in LPEA, where I am, it really depends. We're in the summer up here, and in the winter down here. So in the winter, we've got people getting up in the morning, turning on their heat, turning it down during the day on. So what your time of use rates are going to be and how you are going to kind of modulate them is going to depend on what kind of incentives you're trying to achieve, and that's going to depend on what your load profile looks like. And these within a rate case are all kind of a negotiated bargain too, because this goes to the rate design issues for getting the rates where they are. Okay, dare I say uranium? Yes.
I was just curious, on the previous slide, where did you get the data from that? Is that widely available?
Yes.
So I can pluck those off the internet?
You should be able to go, if not at the Public Utilities Commission, you should be able to get it off the website of each of the utilities themselves.
Great.
Yeah, and there probably are even documents that, actually, if you go into the market price referent section on the California Public Utilities Commission, they have a tab, I believe, in the workbook that has all 3 of them.
And I mean, like other states, would they have those as well? Do you know?
I would guess that most large utilities have some time of use adjustment.
Thank you.
Because the whole purpose is so we don't have to build more plants. So you're trying to reduce your peak load. So I would guess that most, maybe not most, but a lot would. Okay, so uranium, and then we're almost done, since we're up to you. It's a hot topic, no pun intended. We had 109. I think that's changing a little bit. But here's the location in the United States of our operating nuclear plants. Nuclear generation kind of moved up. We're seeing some build-outs of repowering of brownfield sites. Southern Company actually has 2 brand new nuclear facilities. planned. I'm not sure if they're under construction, but they were planned and committed to during the time of high natural gas prices. This, I think, is really two very interesting graphs. You know, post Fukushima, nobody's really talking much about new nuclear, and perhaps for good reason. I think there's a real push me, pull you. If you know climate change is as dire as we think it is, this is a great carbon-free fuel. But what do we do with the spent fuel? You know, in the United States, we've not been able to figure that out to our large detriment, I think. So I'll just leave it at that. But I think these are two very interesting graphs, also from this year's annual energy review. The one on the right is showing electricity demand growth. And it's really fascinating that, and we used to say 2.5%. That was kind of the standard planning per annum. But I think with efficiency, energy efficiency, demand response, we're starting to see that flatten out, and their projection going out is very flat. So if you're an electricity planner and you're earning return on investment, that's where you have to have that decoupling, was the word I was looking for earlier, of your rates from your kilowatt hours. And then here you can see, here's the nuclear piece. You see some new nuclear coming in, and that would be plants that are already under construction. And you don't really see anything until way out here, and I'm not quite sure what would be driving that. But you see lots and lots of natural gas and increasing renewables on the stack for generating capacity as we go forward. And this value-based options, this kind of goes to feed-in tariffs versus cost-based, and really the two can come together. If you have a cost-based pricing for renewables, where you basically say, okay, whatever your costs are, that's what we're going to pay you for, that's sometimes really difficult to sell because the costs are higher. And that's where the waterfall analysis was really trying to say, okay, what's the value that these bring to the table? And if you're lucky, the value will get you somewhere covering your costs with some subsidies. But bottom line, I think for it, they're really flip sides of the same coin, and we're going to pay more for the technologies that we're subsidizing until we can bring them down to a grid parity level. And just the success factors kind of go back to some of the pieces we've already talked about. Accessibility, we want to transform the market, equality. I think that was really driven in Germany with this idea that we want to make everybody able to participate in this program. And the standard contract is critical. You don't want to have to renegotiate a contract every time you want to put in renewables. So make it simple, and you have to have long-term renewable prices, and that's why you have those 20-year commitment, so that you can go to the bank and say, for 20 years, I'm going to get whatever price I'm going to get for my renewables. Reduce the uncertainty. And really, this is the W is my last substantive letter, and it relates to water and energy because it's a huge issue. California, was another one of those fun facts that no one tell. They use 20% of their total electricity use, and 30% of their natural gas is not used to generate power, is related to their movement of water. That's an enormous amount of energy. So, and an important one. And this is just a little schematic that shows all of what energy is flowing and where the water is flowing. But part of that's because they have a lot of pumped hydro, but part of it's because they've got a big state and they've got to move the water from where it is to where the people need it. A lot of agriculture, but that's a lot of water use. And of course, again, I think water is going to be the conflict resource of the future. I think that's another area. If I were starting over, I would do water because.
So where does that cost show up, on your water bill or your electric bill? It's 20%.
In your electric bill, yeah. Water
so that's
is,
some shared base cost. Where do they roll in?
I say in your electric bill. I shouldn't say that. I know it doesn't show up much in your water bill because water is such an underpriced resource. So there may be some subsidies involved with water use. Probably to the agricultural community in California, there's probably subsidies involved. So that's a good question.
Underpriced. I pay more than I pay for gasoline for it when I buy a bottle of water.
That's different. That's elective. Yeah, but that's another one of those astonishing facts, right? But and of course, water for fracking. is huge, and particularly in Texas and the Southwest where you don't have a lot of water to spare. And this is just a schematic on fracking. Many of you are aware of it, but the things that have really made fracking possible is the ability to directionally drill and get along the horizontal within this shale. And then you work your way down by injecting this fluid that has a mix of fracking chemicals, water, and sand. You inject it under high pressure, and that breaks open the shale and allows the gas to flow, and most of the water comes back up the hole, and you end up with a lot of water called produced water that you have to manage because now you've got all the fracking chemicals in it. And whether it's on the surface, here it's showing us a pit, some states are requiring you to re-inject that. This is, obviously another politically hot topic, and everybody in the room, I'm sure, will have a different opinion on it. But I just wanted to draw a connection with water because it is an important one. And not only the use of the water, but getting the water to the site. Because in this case, they're saying roughly 200 tanker trucks for each well that you frack. That's a lot of traffic on your roads, etc. So if you're a small town in western North Dakota, how do you manage, all of that abuse on your roads? Presumably you're going to have some kind of a fee. So
can I say one thing? Coming
Yes.
here from the petroleum industry, I just can't help myself.
Yes, please.
That drawing is not to scale. The vertical section of that well is miles long, and it's through
Thank you.
solid rock. The pollution that you're hearing about is coming from those open pits, and those are pretty much illegal now. But it's in the disposal, and you're absolutely
Yeah.
right. Your water is not being contaminated by the fractures themselves.
Well,
I swear to God.
Yeah, and that is is this
Yeah,
a,
so it's 7,000 feet.
is it a geo, yeah, it's not a, but I think that's a good
Just-
point. And I
There's
put
a lot
that
of
up here.
misconceptions about it.
Right, I put that up here, but I appreciate that clarification that it is not to scale, because, the water table that we're drawing our water from is relatively shallow, and the fracking is happening, thousands of feet underground typically. So I guess I would just ask you from the industry, are the wild stories that you hear, I feel like you could always have bad operators.
And
if
a
you're
lot
not-
of stuff that was going on the East Coast early on, it was just a boomtown mentality. There were a lot of people moving fast and loose. And I really do believe it's mostly on the disposal end where you're seeing those problems. And a lot of that stuff is natural seep too. A lot of that gas that you're seeing at the surface was already there.
Yeah.
And a lot of the tar that you see that pushes up on the beach is the same type of thing. It's natural seeps out of the seabed. It was always there.
Mhm.
But it's not, it isn't coming out of those fractures. But yeah, we got a real black eye on that, and
Yes.
it's really something, anytime I'm with a group, I have to say, it's not coming from the fractures.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate it, but I think, one, like you say, if you have a big boomtown mentality, I guess my thoughts have always been, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that, you can have some bad operators who are not gonna case a well properly.
It's
as
the
you go through.
disposal, it really is, it's on the
Okay.
disposal side, I
Okay.
really believe that.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for that. Yeah, we have natural seeps, in the middle of our river. So, anyway, but the main point here was just, the idea of the connection between water and energy. Appreciate that clarification, thank you.
And water is a huge issue.
Huge issue. Yeah, particularly, like I said, in the Southwest, Texas, areas where you don't have a lot of it. Okay, XYZ.
Oh, that's a cop-out.
I've covered a lot, as I said, if you're a specialist in any of these areas, you're probably thinking, she really glossed over that. I did, but I wanted to really put a lot of concepts out there so that when you're doing policy, you can be thinking about, some of the things that may ring a bell, and I'll get with you in just a second. The XYZ, it's just XYZ, but we've just scratched the surface. So one.
Yeah, I was just curious, in the context of subsidies, I hear that as far as renewables all the time, and I was wondering if there was a good resource that you knew of that looked at historical subsidies for all energy fuel types over time, and how they've evolved, and like subsidies for nuclear construction.
I know that's a hot topic, I don't know, does anybody in the room?
It's not historical, but there was a paper by Metcalf in 2009. It was basically looking at effective tax rates, net of subsidies for different types of energy products. METCALF, I think it's 2009, Gilbert.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Because it seems kind of, I don't know, it seems very subjective to say that renewables have this, this need for subsidies, but yet again, so much of our, what you might call dirty energy doesn't include the external costs of, of their usage. And so in effect, we are indirectly subsidizing that use.
Absolutely.
And so, it seems unfortunate that there's this, constant.
Constant perception that we're paying more for renewables,
Yeah.
when if we had an even playing field, maybe
Right.
that wouldn't be the case.
Right.
Point well taken. Point well taken. Any other comments or questions? Well, thank you very much for coming and for sticking it out. I realized I went over and I wasn't sure I'd have enough time. Thank you very much.
And will your presentation be on the website?
I haven't decided.
Okay.
Frankly,
Well, can you send it to us individually?
I would prefer to send it to you individually if I could.
Oh, that'd be great.
If you want to just give me your card and put a note on the back, please send it to me.
Sorry.
Could I send you an email requesting?
Absolutely, I'll give you mine.
I'll swap with you. Yeah. Sure, thanks.
Thank you.
Yes, yes. Send me an email and remind me what.
I will.
Thank you. Okay, just put a